In this video, before we install and configure our virtual apps and desktop site, I just want to go over some Active Directory considerations and best practices. So we'll go through things like OU structure, naming convention. We'll look at Active Directory sites and services and configuring our subnet objects and associating them with Active Directory sites. We'll look at delegating permissions to our Citrix admins to perform various tasks for their job. We'll look at loopback processing for group policy. So let's begin. So the first thing I want to talk about is just an OU structure. So if we bring up Active Directory users and computers, we can see here I've got a top level OU called Citrix, and then underneath that I've got an infrastructure OU. This contains all my control layer components, delivery controllers, storefront servers, license servers, file and print. I've also got two OUs, one for groups, so this will be for all our Active Directory Citrix related groups that will control permissions to delivery groups, app groups and published apps. The service account OU will contain all our Active Directory service accounts for PVS Stream service, LDAP bind account on our NetScaler, as well as our MCS service account to connect to vCenter. Underneath the Citrix top level OU, I've then got a VDA OU. This contains my server OS and desktop OS catalogs. So I've split these out by FlexCast models. So under server OS we've got hosted shared desktops, and we've also got on-demand apps. I then subdivide that by provisioning technology, PVS MCS, subdivide that then by operating system version, and then subdivide that by department, business unit, slash app silo. Under the desktop OS catalogs, I've split those up again by the FlexCast model. So we've got pooled, which are the random and persistent machines, and then we've got the dedicated, which are the static persistent machines. If we have a look underneath that, we've got Windows 10, and then under dedicated we've got MCS and then Windows 7. So that's just an example OU structure. Again, it will vary depending on the business. Most companies set up an OU structure by regions, department, business units, etc. So this is just an example OU structure just to get you going. When we've got an OU structure like this, it makes applying group policy easier because we can just create a GPO and then filter and link that GPO specifically to an OU that contains a subset of our machines or users, and those settings will then apply only to those users or computers. So it's very important that we do this before we start with the installation. So that's an example OU structure. What I want to talk about now is a naming scheme. So if I bring up this file here, we've obviously, before we build our servers, we need to know what we're going to use for our naming scheme. Again, very company specific, but this is just an example naming scheme that I've used. So LON is for London, so that will be the London data center. CTX for Citrix, and then DDC DDC01 is the actual specific role of the server, so that's a delivery controller. DDC02 second delivery controller. SF for storefront, DR for director, LIC for license server, FS for file server, SQL for SQL, print for print. For our VDA workloads, I've split up by the different FlexCast models. So we've got London for London Data Center, CTX for Citrix, HSD for Hosted Shared Desktop, and then FIN for the Finance Department, MKT for Marketing, IT for IT, and then for our VDI workloads, so these are our Windows 7 and Windows 10, we've got P for pooled, and then S for static, and then we've got W10 for Windows 10. So that's just an example naming scheme, so I thought I would show you that just as an example. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into Active Directory sites and services. So it's very important that this is done as well, because if you don't do this, when users are authenticating and logging into your Citrix VDAs for their apps and desktops, there is a possibility that they can be authenticating to a domain controller in a completely different site, which will be across the WAN. So your logon times and the processing of group policy will be really slow. So it's very important to do this. So we've got 3 Active Directory sites here: London, New York and Miami. As the VDAs are in the London data center, they will be associated, the subnet that those VDAs use will be associated with the London Active Directory site, and there's a domain controller within the London Active Directory site which will authenticate the users. So to do that, we open Active Directory sites and services. From underneath on subnets, we right click, we create a new subnet. So the VDA subnet that I'm going to use for this environment will be 192.168.3.0, and that's going to be a /24, so subnet mask 255.255.25.0, and we're going to associate that new subnet with the London site. So our subnet now is added. If we right click on the London site, choose properties, you can see that subnet now is associated with the London Active Directory site. If we expand the London Active Directory site under servers, we've got a single domain controller in that site called DC01. So all authentication now, once users log into our VDAs in London, will be authenticated and processed by that domain controller. So we've localized our authentication, which is a good thing. So the next thing I want to talk about is some group policy related tasks. So one of the things you'll notice is our Citrix OU here is inheriting GPOs from the parent. So the parent is the carmo.com domain, and you can see here we've got 3 GPOs which are linked at the domain. If I click on the Citrix OU, you can see through inheritance it's actually inheriting these GPOs, so all the settings within those GPOs will be applied to our Citrix users' computers, which we typically don't want. If an admin was to come along and change one of those GPOs and change a setting that we didn't want, that would then filter down and apply to our Citrix users and computers. So what I tend to do is I tend to right click on the Citrix OU and I just choose to block inheritance. When I block inheritance, you can see it's no longer inheriting those GPOs from the domain, and none of those settings with any of those GPOs will now be applied to our Citrix users' computers. There is one exception to this. If an admin was to come along and enforce a GPO, if I click on my Citrix OU now with inheritance blocked, you can see that enforced GPO is being applied. Even with block inheritance, if you enforce a GPO, it does plow through that inheritance and will be applied. So you should use enforced GPOs sparingly. If you do see Windows admins enforcing a lot of GPOs, you need to tell them to stop that unless they've got specific reason to do so. For example, they want all the settings within that GPO to apply to everything in the domain, even with inheritance blocked on OUs. So just check that. So I'm just going to untick that and not enforce it. So again, now we're not actually inheriting any GPOs from above. One of the things we need to do is our Citrix admins typically will manage group policy objects. So they'll be creating, editing, modifying, deleting, linking, unlinking GPOs. So we need to delegate those permissions to our Citrix admins. So if we come under group policy objects, by default you can see these groups are the only groups that have access to be able to create GPOs. We've got the group policy creator owners and domain admins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that group in Active Directory, do a search for group policy creator owners, click on members, and then I'm going to add our Citrix_admins. What this is basically doing, it's giving our Citrix admins the ability to create new GPOs. So they'll be able to right click here now and click on a new GPO and create a new GPO. So if we refresh that now, you can see the Citrix admins are now a member of the group policy creator owners, which have the permissions to create GPOs. We now need to give them the ability to edit GPOs. we need to click on basically all our Citrix related GPOs. So for example, if I click on this Citrix FAS GPO and come under delegation, you can see that the Citrix admins don't have the ability to edit these GPOs. So what you would actually do is you would come under here and then you click on add, and then we'll click on Citrix admins, click on OK, and then it's asking the permissions that we want to add to our Citrix admins group. So we want them the ability to edit settings, delete and modify security. So that will give them the ability to edit these GPOs, delete these GPOs, which they typically would do because they're fully managed, all the group policy objects related to Citrix. So you can see we'll click on OK, and now we've done that. If we click on another Citrix GPO, you can see it's not inherited or that permission's not there. So we have to do this on every GPO that the Citrix team will actually manage. So again, we'll do Citrix admins, click on OK. We'll give them the edit settings, delete and modify security permissions. Again, this GPO here, do the same. Again, we'll give them edit settings, delete and modify security, and then the final one here. Click on OK. Edit settings, delete, modify security. So that's that done. So we've gave the Citrix admins the ability to create GPOs through membership of the group policy creator owners. We've then edited all the Citrix related GPOs, and then we've gave them the ability to edit those GPOs. What we need to do now is give them the ability to link and unlink the GPOs at the OUs where they're going to be linking them. So if we come under Citrix, and then if we come under delegation, and then if we come under click on add, we'll add our Citrix admins here. Click on check name, click on OK, and then we want this to inherit all the way down, so we'll click this container on all child objects, and then under here we'll make sure link GPOs is selected, and then we'll click on add again. We'll add our Citrix admins again, but this time we want to let's cancel that. We want to perform group policy modeling analysis. So you can see if we click on link GPOs, they've got the ability now to link and unlink GPOs, but they haven't got the ability to perform group policy modeling. So that's using the group policy results wizards and the group policy modeling wizard. So we want them to be able to use both of those. So we'll click on add, click on Citrix admins, and then we'll inherit all the way down, and then read group policy results data. We also want them to have that ability as well. Click on OK. Again, inherit that all the way down, and that's it done. So now if we click on example the VDA OU, server OS, and then click on hosted shared desktops, MCS, and then this OU, you can see if we go through link GPOs, Citrix admins have got the ability to link and unlink GPOs, perform group policy modeling analysis, and also read group policy results data. So we've now gave them the full ability. They can create new GPOs, they can edit existing Citrix GPOs only, they can also link and unlink GPOs, and they've got the ability to run group policy modeling results. So we've fully delegated them now control in group policy. What we now need to do is delegate them the permissions to be able to create and delete computer objects. So when they're using provisioning technologies like MCS and PVS and creating catalogs and adding and removing machines from the catalog, as part of those provisioning technologies, they'll need the ability to create and delete computer objects in specific OUs. So what I tend to do is I expand the Citrix OU. Under the VDA OU, I'll right click, click on properties, go to security, click on advanced. We'll then go to add, select a security principal, so it'll be Citrix admins, check name, and then if we scroll all the way down, there's two permissions here. create computer objects and delete computer objects. So if we click OK on that, so Citrix admins have to create and delete computer objects, and that will inherit all the way down. Click apply on that, click OK, and now for example if I expand desktop OS pooled Windows 10, click on properties, go to security, click on advanced, and then if we go down to Citrix admins, you can see there's the permissions to create and delete computer objects. So that's another one ticked off the list. So what I'm going to talk about now is loopback processing. So if I edit a GPO, for example this one here, you can see a GPO is made up of two halves, the computer configuration and then the user configuration. So for example, if I was to come in here under policies, admin templates, and then if we expand system, and then for example go into control, alt delete options, and then remove task manager, and then just click enabled. So you can see this is under user configuration, admin template, system, control alt delete options, remove task manager. This is a user specific policy setting. So if I close out of the group policy management editor, and now if I was to link this GPO, so for example if I came under server OS, hosted shared desktop, MCS 2008 R2 finance, and then click link an existing GPO, and then if I find that GPO, the IE-GPP one, click OK. This OU, the finance OU, only contains servers, computer accounts. That policy setting that we've set in that GPO is a user specific setting. So when users logged into that server within that finance OU, that user policy setting wouldn't apply, because as I say, that GPO is split up into two sides, computer and user side. We've made a change within the user side to remove the task manager, but there's actually no users under this finance OU. So this is where loopback processing comes into play. There's two modes with loopback processing, merge and replace mode. What merge does is it looks at the OU that the user account resides in, and all the GPOs linked to the OU that contains the user account. It will apply all the user specific settings, and then the server that the user logs into with loopback in merge mode enabled, it will then apply the user settings within that GPO as well, and then if there's any conflict in settings, the one with the merge and loopback on wins. So it merges the settings together. It blends the settings in. So if you've got users in 10 different OUs, and those 10 different OUs have 10 different GPOs with all different settings, you're going to get different user settings based off wherever the user is in Active Directory. So I tend to use replace mode quite a lot. So what replace mode will do is I can create GPOs and link them to OUs that contain all my Citrix servers. I can then define all the user policy settings, so things like control panel settings, Internet Explorer settings, group policy preferences, etc. And then within that GPO, I can then link that GPO to my OU that contains my servers, and because it's got loopback on in replace mode, it will apply the user settings which are linked to the server. So that way I can control all the user related settings. It doesn't matter where the user account sits in Active Directory and which OU that user account sits in with all the GPOs applied. It will only apply the user settings that I've defined, which are linked to my Citrix servers. So it allows us full control of the user environment and controlling what policies we want to be applied. So again, that's fully recommended. I recommend setting that to loopback in replace mode. I'll show you basically where to set that. So if we edit this GPO, if we go under computer configuration, under policies, and then admin templates, and then under system, and then under group policy, the setting is configure loopback processing. So let me just find that setting. Just looking for it. That's the one there. Configure user group policy loopback processing mode. So you can see at the moment it's not configured. If I click on that and then enable that, these are the two options, merge mode and replace mode. So I recommend replace mode. Click apply, click on OK, and that's now done. What I can now do is I can create a GPO and link it here. And even though this finance OU is just going to contain my Citrix servers, my VDAs, I can actually come into this GPO now and I can set loads of user configuration settings, and I know that they will apply to my Citrix server users logging into our Citrix servers. So for example here, if I go into start menu, and then if we go down to remove log off on the start menu, click on enabled, click on apply, and then close out of that. That will now apply to users logging into my Citrix servers which reside in the finance OU, even though that user account actually isn't in that OU. Because we've got loopback on in replace mode, that will now happen. So that's good. That's what we wanted. And that's it. So in the next video we'll start talking about Citrix licensing, and we'll get our Citrix license server configured and installed. Thank you for watching. Cheers. Bye.